So obviously a lot of you know that I was a big build around Justin Fields guy, and I'll never run from that. And I hope that 10 years from now we'll look back and be like, you know what, you were kind of ridiculous for even saying such a thing. And not that he won't do well in Pittsburgh or anything like that, but you know what I'm saying. So I really do hope that, it's going to work out well for Caleb Williams. I mean, I've been on board ever since the Bears made the decision, traded him away, Justin Fields, for a conditional 4th round pick, a potential 6th round pick, whatever it's going to end up being. But here's the thing that's been coming out over the last couple of days, ever since the draft, is as much as, and listen, I'm on board with Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams is going to be great. I thought that even as a Justin Fields person, I thought that going with Caleb Williams is going to be fine. I think he's good. I think there's multiple ways to get there. There's 2 different varieties of pizza in Chicago, 3, 4, it doesn't matter. But here's what I've noticed over the last couple of days is that people, and these are mostly the people who are like, you got to take Caleb Williams, are now trying to tell us like, whoa, what? Don't expect him to be good right up. No, actually, I do expect him to be good right off the bat. The good news here, I mean, here's the thing, like there should be a reasonable expectation that Caleb Williams is going to be good during his first NFL season. I mean, you look at some of the guys like obviously CJ Stroud last year, Justin Herbert, and some of the other rookie quarterbacks who've done well during their rookie season. I think there's a reasonable expectation, especially when you consider the guys that have been put around him. Like he should be good. That is again, the good news again is that Caleb Williams also has this expectation. You saw what he texted to Tory Taylor. You saw the way he's been talking in recent interviews. He expects to be good. So I think that 10 wins is the floor for this team. And I really do. And I can't wait to get in and talk a little bit more about this. So Sammy, let's just go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? It is time for Take It to the Rank. Great show planned for you this evening. Chad Reuter will be joining us here from NFL.com in just a matter of moments. And of course, there's a lot of great stuff that happens on Wednesday night. We have AEW Dynamite. We have MTV's The Challenge, which drops on Paramount Plus. And of course, the Tape Never Lies Network will be with us. And speaking of which, quick shout out to our friend Ronnie at the Tape Never Lies Network, who was instrumental in helping us get everything off the ground in Chicago last week for the draft. That's right. Ronnie really saved the day. Actually, I'm still using the mic that he gave us. I don't know that you're getting it back because it actually sounds way too good. And it's been way, way more comfortable than having that big microphone being in my face. So big thanks to Ronnie for doing all of that. I got a great story to share about our encounters there. I'll save it for another time. Also want to shout out the Game Room Chicago for a wonderful draft night event. They could not have been nicer. I've stayed at a lot of cool hotels, and the things that make hotels really sing, it's the staff. You know what I'm saying? Like hotels should be nice. The staff at the Game Room Chicago are unbelievable. And again, if you're ever in the downtown Chicago area, even before games and everything, we always talk about this on this show a lot. The Game Room Chicago is the place to be, but I really do endorse it. I really do believe in it. It is a great spot, a lot of fun. So if you're in the area, go check that out. Game Room Chicago. Now, for any of you who over the last couple of days has started to tire of all the glowing praise the Bears have received over the last couple of days for their draft efforts, well, I've got a treat for you. I had to go out there and find a hating Packers fan who would go out there and try to put us in our place, kind of throw some cold water and try to dampen our enthusiasm. So I went to a place where I currently work. It's the NFL Media Group, and Chad Reuter has been with us since about 2001. Actually, it's about 2011. I know he's been doing draft stuff since the early 2000s. I think it was 2001. But since 2011, he was part of the original content team. Does a great job on NFL.com breaking down the draft. He moves out to California for a month. He's about ready to go back home. And even though he's trying to enjoy a last few days of sunshine, well, sort of overcast sunshine and some good vibes here in Southern California, he's decided to come join us. So please welcome to the show, Chad Reuter of the NFL Media Group. Chad, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. You're right. Vacation has started, but I said for Adam, we're going to do this, and we're going to talk Bears, and we're going to love it.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. It's kind of like when I'm forcing my kids to go out there and do something against their will. They still come out and do it, and I appreciate you doing that and bearing with us, pun intended, so to speak. I noticed your most recent article on NFL.com. I've already got the defensive posture working. No, your most recent article on NFL.com, your favorite picks of each round. You couldn't throw a Rome Odunze in there or anything? Tory Taylor, nothing? Like nothing about the Bears stood out as one of your favorite picks of the draft?
I thought about Odunze. I really did. And the thing is with those picks, I know that I am biased towards guys that maybe were picked later than I expected, because I'm looking at guys that were good value. That's really what it comes down to with my favorite picks. So Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, they were picked pretty much where I figured they'd be picked. But Rome could have been on that list because I think he could be the second best receiver in this draft. And in some ways we'll see what Marvin Harrison does. If he becomes a superstar, then that's fine. But if Harrison's just kind of a pretty good receiver, then Odunze could actually overcome exceed expectations more than either of the other two that were picked before him. So if I were to pick one Bears pick that to be in that, it would be him or Austin Booker, who we might talk about later. But I that's why kind of where I come down on those favorite picks. So no shade being thrown.
And you had to get a Packer in there. Who was it? Javon, who was the safety, the Packers picked in the second round. I know that you were very high. That was a good pick by them. I'll even admit. They do much better in every round outside of the first. It always feels that way. But they do a very nice job of drafting. But going back to Rome Odunze, what was your comp for him coming? I've seen some good ones, and I know everybody's got their own version of this. Who is a comp for Rome Odunze?
Mike Williams, that went from the Chargers to the Jets. That was my guy that I kind of like him to, because he's good at everything. He may not be he's not elite speed. He's not elite a lot of things, but he's very good at everything. And that means something especially for a young quarterback. Like Williams, he's going to lean on Keenan Allen, right? I mean, he's going to lean on Keenan Allen, but Odunze is going to be good enough early in his career that Cub's going to be able to trust him. He's going to be in the right spot. He's going to make defenders miss. He's going to run over some guys. And he can get deep as well. So he does everything well. And I thought that was really, a smart move for them to take him maybe over one of the edge rushers or whatever. They needed to build. And, you said it in the open about Herbert having not only Williams and Allen, but also Hunter Henry when he was a rookie. And so you gotta build that team around your guy and hope that he can pull the strings. And, every guy goes through some bumps and bruises early in the year. But I think when people were asking me about Caleb Williams versus Fields, I thought Caleb Williams would be just as good as Justin Fields halfway through his rookie year. And so that's where I'm kind of at with that as well.
And I know that you did write in one of your pieces, it might have been in the draft grades, because I know you gave the Bears an A- overall in the draft. I think a lot of that had to do, they didn't have a ton of picks. So just still getting to that level was pretty impressive. You said though, that this was probably the Bears' best receiving core since the merger. And not to throw shade at any of the other past teams, but like they did once have Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey on the same team. So it's not like it's not damning with faint praise or anything like that. But it feels like, did it feel un-Bears like that they did this, that they actually went all in on offense instead of like trading down, picking up Jared Verse, or doing what we have come accustomed to over the years.
Well, and to be honest, like if Odunze is not there, they may have traded out. And I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons why you didn't see as many trades in the first round this year is because those quarterbacks went early, and teams like the Bears and and others decided to stay put and take the guys that they got. So things a little bit different. You might have been able to get a few more picks out of another team and trade down a little bit, and that would have been okay too, depending on who they got. But in this case, you can get two guys that are going to help your offense for years to come. You stood there and you did what you had to do.
Yeah, I felt that was a kind of a stroke of luck, because I know when I was doing my mock draft with a twist, I kind of had to play fast and loose with everything to make sure that, as I'm advising teams, as I do in that piece, to make sure that Rome Odunze was going to be available there. I didn't quite anticipate the Falcons taking Michael Penix. I mean, that had to be a shot. I know that Ryan Poles sort of chuckled when he was asked about it, but that was somewhat crazy, it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of people who were talking about it before the draft, but overall, you never know if those things are rumors or if they're true or whatever. So, I was a little surprised by that pick, that they actually did it, given their situation. Not because of Penix as a player, because of the situation and his injury history, frankly. I mean, you don't see a guy who's missed parts of 4 seasons due to injury picked that high in the draft. So, but yeah, so that came in their favor, for sure. And having 2 tackles instead of just Joe Alt go was a big having the so that was the other factor that kind of allowed the Bears to get Odunze in there. And so they got some fortune, and he knew that.
Yeah, once the Chargers didn't take Malik Neighbors, and there was a Chargers fan who's been haranguing me on social media for the last 2 months, like, "Oh, you sure they're taking Joe Alt? You sure? You sure?" Actually, I am sure. I was pretty sure, and I think like the reasons why. I mean, it was obvious. That's who they were going to take. I had actually written this in my piece that the Falcons could have done the funniest thing ever of taking Brock Bowers, so they could have 2 tight ends, and really just really thrown the fantasy community into a tizzy. But I think it makes a lot of sense. It would have been, but like they should have, like, at this point, if you're taking Michael Penix, shouldn't you have just taken Rome Odunze? Because I think for the same reasons that it makes sense for the Bears, it would have made sense for the Falcons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned that when we talk in our meetings, before the Path to the Draft show, and I was talking to people about it. I'm like, look, Kyle Pitts is a tight end in name only. And you put Bowers and Pitts on the field at the same time on the outside with Drake London and Bijan in the backfield, I would have been totally great with that pick. Look, they got to do what they got to do. But to me, that made a lot more sense. A lot of people were picking Dallas Turner. I kind of pulled away from that at the end and said maybe a Quinyon Mitchell, the corner, with Raheem Morris there. That guy.
That's right. I saw that. Yeah.
I can't believe the Eagles got him, or they got him late in the first round. That was a steal. So there's a lot of directions they could have gone to improve the team now. And, this could be one of those picks where everybody's like, are you kidding me? What are you doing? And then it turns out great, or we may always be right. And that's why I do draft grades. People are always, why do you do draft grades? They don't mean anything now until 3 years from now. Well, unfortunately, if you wait until 2 or 3 years from now, everybody's using hindsight. They don't remember what was said at the time. So you need a baseline in order to, evaluate these things later. So that's why I wrote now. This may be great, but for right now, it doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's always interesting because I feel the same way. Like it's easy to go back in hindsight and be like, yeah, of course you should have taken Patrick Mahomes instead of Mitch Trubisky. But even then in that moment, it was a terrible pick. And I think that a lot of Bears fans echoed that sentiment. Even so that Mitch was booed at a Bulls game the day after. But here's the thing too. So you mentioned the Eagles getting away with this. I always feel like the Ravens do this too. Like Nate Wiggins, was it Nate Wiggins? Like how does this always happen? Where somebody great always falls to a team like the Ravens or something like that. It's always wild. That's why I think it's so refreshing for the Bears to end up with Rome Odunze, because like a lot of things had to go correctly for this to be pulled off. The Falcons doing it the Titans going with the tackle. Thankfully, you figured Malik Neighbors was going to go somewhere. So that was a lot of good fortune. What wasn't good fortune, or I guess it was good fortune because Carolina was so terrible. Caleb Williams. What is your evaluation of Caleb Williams compared to quarterback prospects? And we can go back to Trevor Lawrence's class.
Yeah.
If you're grouping all of those quarterbacks in together, which I guess would be Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, the most notable, where does Caleb Williams fall into that mix?
I think he is right there with Lawrence. I think he's right in that same area. And CJ Stroud was great last year with the Texans, but I think if anybody says they had him graded as highly as Williams or Lawrence coming out, I think they're being disingenuous.
Yeah.
And so I think he's right there with Lawrence. Williams, hey, look, the offensive line wasn't great. He had to play some hero ball when he was at USC. He wasn't patient in the pocket at times. He did things wrong. Guess what? Every quarterback does things wrong at the college level, right? So, let's get over that. Okay. In terms of a guy, I don't know that I've seen a better deep ball from a guy since Jeff Blake. The way that he arcs that deep ball is pretty amazing. And so I'm hoping he gets to show that early so people know of what I'm speaking. But in terms of mobility within the pocket, he can make plays from the pocket, even though he, gets a little impatient sometimes. There's just a lot to love about that guy. And I don't listen to the garbage about what he has on his hands. And, I heard that all with Cam Newton. I heard that all with a million guys. Forget it. He's a playmaker. He's a very good quarterback. And I really thought that he was going to win 2 Heismans, the one at Oklahoma, one at USC when he first came out. I really thought he was going to do it. And he tailed off a little bit that first year at the end, or the team did. But I think he's a great talent. And I think the Bear fans are really going to be happy with what they have in him.
And I really like his demeanor. I think that everything that we've seen about him ever since he's come out now, the Bear Claw thing, it's now this is what people in Chicago are arguing about, is like, who created the Bear Claw? And they're like, well, the super fan does it, but the super fan has actual claws on his hands. Like nobody's embraced it. Like, and like, obviously, like the NWO, like people did this before the NWO, but it's synonymous with the NWO. You know what I'm saying? Like the Too Sweet. Like there's nothing that compares, even so much that the WWE put a trademark against the Young Bucks for doing it. Like it's a cool thing. And I love Caleb doing that. And I think his demeanor, I think it's so cool. Like he comes off as a cool guy. I was shocked. I'm not shocked because the internet's terrible, but like his phone call with his phone call with Poles and Eberflus, I thought that was cool. Like I thought he was just super chill, and people were like, this is the cringiest thing. I'm like, I don't know. I thought it was cool. As somebody who's kind of like, you might have a reason to root against him at some point in the future. What do you think about him as his persona over the last couple of days, over the last week or so? Because I thought he's equated himself pretty nicely.
Well, I think he's been that way the whole time. Like I think
that's true.
So, to me, like he's a cool guy. His teammates all love him. You saw when he got picked, the raw emotion that came out of his achieving a goal that has been his goal the whole time. And there was all this garbage, like, oh, he's only going to play for this team, and this team that came out, and whatever, that was garbage. But I think he's been that guy. And I think one of the reasons that he took over for Spencer Rattler in Oklahoma as quickly as he did is because he has that demeanor, because he gets along with his teammates. And Lincoln Riley's like, I got to get this guy in the field. He's a difference maker. And Spencer Rattler's a pretty decent quarterback. He's got his own issues, but he's a pretty good quarterback, especially at the college level. So for Williams to do that, I think this has been part of his package the whole time. Some people are offended by whatever because they like to be offended. But I think he's been cool, and I'm very excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, I guess it was more so on a national level. Is like seeing all that stuff come out, because of course I live out here in Southern California, so I'm pretty well aware of Caleb Williams, and we've seen him around, and everything about that is cool. And I think too, because Ryan Poles in that phone call was talking about like, hey, I've had to wait on this for a while now. I think now you start to understand why they sort of gave Fields away, so to speak, where it's just like this, as much as popular as Justin was in the locker room, and guys like Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker really loved Justin Fields. But even as recently as 2 days ago, like DJ Moore's already kind of like, yep, okay, he's moved on, like he's already posted, like he's already moved on, so to speak. I think that business. Yeah, I think like the Bears recognize like, oh, the team's going to fall in love with Caleb Williams, and there's no reason, even if it costs us, we could probably hold on to Justin Fields. But like instead of making him do the Garoppolo of practicing on a separate field, like just let him go to Pittsburgh and deal with that over there.
You cut your losses. And look, I mean, Justin Fields was not – I really liked what I saw from Justin Fields last year. But the fact is there was no leverage. The Bears had zero leverage, and getting what they could for him was all they could do. And because everybody in the league knew what they were going to do. Why would a team offer a second-round pick for him? There's no reason for it. And the fact that they got what they could, and maybe it turns out to be a great thing if he comes on for the Steelers and does what he needs to do. So I wish him a lot of success in Pittsburgh. I hope he learns some things from Russell Wilson, maybe not other things, and really becomes a great quarterback. Because I was on board with him immediately coming out of college. A lot of people had a lot of nice things to say with him coming out of college. And it was funny to watch Denver pass on him. And now, like, what could have Sean Payton have done with Justin Fields? Just kind of fun to think about. Like, so anyway, it's fun to think about. I hope he does great. And the Bears made the right move here, no matter what happens going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and just telling all Chicago fans, like, you can still want to be a fan of Justin Fields. I'll be a fan of him. My friend Britt Baker, who's a huge Steelers fan, you know, when we talk football, I'm always like, listen, I'm going to be rooting for him. I hope that he does really well. Not even in the selfish sense of like we get a better pick, the better he performs. Right. But I want to see him succeed because I still truly believe that if circumstances would have been different, that he could have been very successful in Chicago, but unfortunately he joined at the the worst possible time. Like you showed up at the beach during, like, you're in LA right now and there was an earthquake. Like you just showed up. Like it just happens sometimes. Like, yeah, that's the luck of the draw. Like, oh, look at the team they built. I'm like, well, yeah, it's not like you can't build the team in the past. Like it's not, it wouldn't do any good. Although we do see some teams sometimes with the veterans that they sign, like, are you playing for 2020 or 2024? But at the same time, like the past is the past, like that. Okay. Yeah. It sucks. Sorry, Justin. Like, I wish you could have been here later, but unfortunately you were here now. The timing just wasn't correct, and it's okay to move on and it's okay to look ahead. And the Bears did the right thing. And some of the problems that Justin had, I think that you could see, like, there was a hesitation to get rid of the ball. And I think that's something that DJ Moore even intimated about, like throwing people open or whatever. I think a lot of that stuff comes from the situation. Like that breeds bad. Like, do you think that, like, you know, if Justin was a rookie right now, like some of the problems that were there in year 3 might not have been there if the situation had been better for him?
Well, I think the thing with Fields was he had that at Ohio State, and that's one reason some people didn't like him. So I think that's something he still has and still need to work through a little bit. But I think he can improve. I mean, I'll be very interested. Like, if he doesn't play at all this year with Pittsburgh, and he just has the year to work with receivers on the practice field and some of the guys that maybe aren't going to play as much for them this year, but maybe next year, he can build some of that confidence with some of those guys. And look, there's a reason the team traded for Keenan Allen. There's a reason they took Odunze. There's a reason that they're building, you know, this team. And so Fields had to deal with some of that too. And look, the Bears didn't do a lot. And the Bears offensive line was better this year. But this last year, but I think there still could be some improvement there. So like that's still going to have to be worked through. And next year that might be part of their draft equation as well, free agency. But there wasn't any choice. Like, the one thing you can't do if you want to keep your job is not take Caleb Williams and see him star somewhere else, because eventually the ownership groups are like, look, you could have had this dude, and we love Justin too, but this isn't what we're doing. We shouldn't have done that. So, and the Carolina staff found that out this last year, right? They were all let go. They saw Bryce Young not do as well. Stroud, right? If CJ Stroud's on that team and does well, Scott Fritter still has his job, So we saw that, and that would have happened here if Williams would have become a superstar.
I would even suggest that CJ Stroud might not have had the success had he been playing for Carolina, because I think that was a tough situation
exactly. You don't
for any quarterback. It's like a lot of that is circumstance. I'm not saying that Bryce Young would have been as good as CJ Stroud last year, but being in the right situation does help you out a lot. And we'll see it this year because Jaden Daniels does at least have Terry McLaurin and some of the other guys, Johan Dotson and players like that. So he's like, okay, he's got an opportunity. Drake May is not going to be good. Like it's not going to work out. And his career could be over before it gets started because
hopefully they'll play Brissett. Hopefully they'll play
they better
early in the year and let May kind of work his way in, especially if they're not any good. Then at least you get them some time on the field and you can build them. They need more receivers. They need a lot more stuff on that team.
Yeah, and that's why you'll see somebody like J.J. McCarthy. Well, I don't even, being honest, I don't know if J.J. McCarthy gets. I think Sam Darnold's going to be doing pretty well, but that's for a podcast for another day. I do want to talk about some of the other Bears draft picks. There weren't many of them. Of course, I'm talking about Kiran Amegadjie. I got to figure out how to say that correctly. So
Amegadjie. He's a mega G.
Amegadjie. He's a mega G. So, interesting player coming out of Yale, the first Ivy League player drafted in the first round since Marcellus Wiley back in the 1990s by the Buffalo Bills. So that's good company. Or drafted this high, I should say. Obviously, he wasn't drafted in the first round, but this high. What do we know about him? Because I was reading Lance Zierlein's breakdown of him, and it seems pretty positive. Listen, I'm not going to pretend like I saw a bunch of his tape. How good is this guy, or how good could he be?
He could be good. He could be pretty good. He's a very look. He's got yardsticks for arms, or like plus 36, right? He's huge. He moves pretty well for his size. Look, he played Ivy League competition, so you don't really know. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to do the postseason stuff. And I think that's the reason why he was still available where the Bears got him. And I had projected him to be drafted right in that area, so it was good value for where they got him. But he's got potential to be pretty good. I think he's a tackle only, so I think he could compete. Probably it would be hard this year for him to compete for the starting job, coming off injury and that kind of stuff. But in year 2, he's probably going to be competing for that job, and we'll see where it goes. But there's a lot of potential there in terms of size, athleticism, intelligence, obviously, Yale. So, am I going to say he's Gary Fensick? No, not right now. But he's see what I did there for Bears fans?
I did. We appreciate that.
And I think there's some potential there, and he was picked right about where I thought he'd go.
And so, and obviously Braxton Jones, I think it's still a good player. And I think he's got some potential. Were you shocked that the Bears didn't try to make an attempt to get a ready-made tackle to go? Or do you think that Braxton Jones is the guy there?
Well, I think he's got to be the guy because they just didn't have.
Well, now he has to be.
Picks, right? I mean, I don't think you can pass on Odunze. If Odunze had been and J.C. Latham was there at 9, they could have taken him, and I could have seen that because he could play left tackle in the NFL. So I could have seen that, and that would have made a lot of sense to me. But with Odunze on there, I don't think you pass him up.
Yeah, it makes too much sense to go with the wide receiver right there, and then for a lot of the reasons that I've talked about, and I talked about on Monday with Rome Odunze, is like it's just refreshing and a refreshing approach for the Chicago Bears to realize, like, look, we got to make our quarterback. This quarterback situation has to work. This is the way to do it, and it's a pick for the future too. Like, we don't know how long Keenan Allen's going to be there. And at some point, and they still have some young guys like Tyler Scott who can eventually come in. Before we get to my favorite pick, let's talk about Austin Booker. Austin Booker, excuse me. Booker. That was an interesting one because I had heard, because I was listening, to some of our draft coverage coming into that, and somebody had mentioned him before that day started as like an edge rusher to watch. How is he still available that late in the draft? Because he feels like a really good pick.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not quite sure. There was a few edge rushers that went later than later than I thought. And I don't think they love the edge rusher class this year. I think they thought it was pretty below average. And when that happens, sometimes guys with potential don't get picked as early because teams are focused on corners. There was a run of corners in the fourth
Yeah.
round. There's a run of and then some of these guys kind of fall by the wayside. So getting Austin Booker, I thought was really smart. A very good pick for them. And I could have seen him going late third, early fourth. And he didn't work out as well as you'd hoped, and that's part of it. Like a guy like that, when he's at Kansas, kind of a 1 year guy, sort of. If he puts the athleticism up, that really makes him stand out. He may have gone a little earlier, but it was
Yeah.
pretty ordinary for a guy his size, and so that didn't really push him up boards as much as maybe you thought. But yeah, really solid pick in the 5th round for sure.
He reminds me, and now I can't even remember the guy's name. I had written it down earlier, but back in the 90s, Arizona State had a defensive end who came out of like Riverside. He played on the Pat Tillman, Jake Plummer teams, who played, he was like in the band at like RCC. And then he became like a 1-year stud at Arizona State that 96 season, went to the Dolphins and did. I'm like, oh, like he kind of reminds me of that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and listen, and playing opposite of Montez Sweat gives you an opportunity, a little leeway to go out there and not have to be the guy, not have to be the person who's counted upon, which is really huge. And you notice, and you mentioned that too in your write-up, where you have, when you're looking at the Bears overall, you have to think about Ryan Bates, Montez Sweat, and Keenan Allen when you're factoring in the Bears overall haul, correct?
That's right. That's right. You have to factor in these trades. And, I can't, and when a team gives a 2nd or 3rd round pick, okay, so the Commanders gave up Sweat for a 2nd and Chase Young for a 3rd. And the Bears re-signed Sweat, and the 49ers did not re-sign Chase Young. So to me, that's much better for the Bears than for the 49ers, because you gave up that pick, but you didn't get, the longer term experience with that player. And so I think getting that extension, 2nd round pick for Sweat with the extension made a lot of sense. So that was a really good move. And Allen for that price, totally fine. So yeah, overall, it's going to be a pretty good haul, even though some guys will be around longer than others.
Yep. And somebody that we hope is going to be around for a long time, Tory Taylor, the pride of the number 1 offensive weapon for Iowa last season. And I know Andrew Siciliano had tweeted it out. I was like, it's one of those things I was so angry that I didn't think of at first, where he's like, oh, the Bears got USC, Washington's, and Iowa's best weapons from last season. What do you make of Tory Taylor going in the 4th round? Was it a little too rich for you?
A little too high for me. When he connects, very good. Obviously, he's done very well with Iowa. Look, you punt the ball 100 times and you're gonna accumulate a lot of yards, right? I mean, like, he's insane. He's setting NCAA records because their offense was so terrible. But overall, he's a good punter. I mean, I think, and they needed that. Now, what I prefer, and this is kind of how it works sometimes. I didn't really like them taking him in the 4th round, but then they got Booker in the 5th round. So if those picks would have been switched, wouldn't have mattered as much. But here's the thing: like, people always say, it doesn't matter what round they're picked. It just matters that the team gets the guy they like. And
that sounds like me.
What I've found, I've found that when teams and consensus value match, the player has a better likelihood of being a special player in the NFL. It's a statistically significant difference. So it matters to some point, but sometimes it just works out where you get a guy later where you could have picked there and you could have picked. So it will. But the fact is that you don't know that when you're picking in the 4th round. You could have picked several guys that were very good players right after that pick instead of getting Taylor, who you hope doesn't get on the field. I mean, that's going to be funny, right? Like, Caleb Williams leads this great offense and Taylor's out there twice a game. And maybe it's really important when he's out there, right? I mean, maybe that's part of the deal, but it's just funny when you pick the guy you don't want to be out on the field at all in the 4th round. But look, he's a talented guy. He was the only punter that I thought would get picked, and he deserved to get picked. It's just a little bit earlier than I figured.
It's one of those things too, and I said this on CHGO this week, is, we just spent so many years trying to get Devin Hester into the Hall of Fame because you're talking about like, hey, special teams is important. You got to win all three phases of the game. And then there are some people, and actually it's not necessarily Bears people who say this is like Yurko and these guys on ESPN 100 who are like, it's a luxury pick for a team that, like, if the Chiefs had done that, I think this is Yurko's point. Like, if the Chiefs had done this, it would have been better. But at the same time, like, if the Bears feel pretty comfortable with what they got, and honestly, I thought Trenton Gill was not great. And I thought too, like, I guess Cairo Santo kind of overcame some of these points. Like, I would always wondered, you know, when the Bears were having trouble kicking the football, it's the punter who's the holder. It's like, is it ever the holder? Like, have you ever thought about that? Yeah, I think having a great special teams room, and if you get Taylor out there twice a game, and he's dropping Scotty Scheffler shots inside the 5, I'm good with that. And I'm good with that and spending a 4th round pick on it.
Maybe it's just a matter of if you could have gotten a guy in after the draft that's going to do similar things. Like, and that's always the issue with kickers and punters. What is the mental part of it is so strong. And I saw Taylor kicking live, and you know, he's got to speed up the delivery a little bit, and that may cause some issues and consistency. But if he works hard at it, gets it done, he'll be totally fine. And so there's just a risk involved. A lot of times, like, the difference between a 1st and a 2nd round pick and a 4th and a 5th round pick is a level of risk and not necessarily talent. So are you going to get as much out of that? So, like, for example, Cade Stover is the pick after Tory Taylor. Now, Cade Stover could end up being a pretty good NFL tight end. And they're okay at tight end, so, you know, and maybe the need isn't there, but like, that's just the kind of the thing you have to go through in your mind. Like, okay, TJ Tampa, Jared Wiley, Jaden Hicks, the safety, goes to the Chiefs. There's a lot of really good players still there at that point in the draft. So is that pick at that time the best value? And I don't know that it is, but boy, you know, like you said, he was the only thing. And it's funny, like, some lower division, smaller school players look great because they're so much better than all the other players around them, even though they may not be pro caliber. And Taylor looked awesome because everybody on that offense was so bad. He just looked great being out there and actually, you know, pinning the other team. He did a great job at that. So it's going to be interesting to see if that translates to the NFL.
Yeah, it was a great system of him pinning the team deep, helping Cooper DeJean go out there and get a pick 6 or something like that. And I understand the value. Listen, you're going to go to the airport at some point, and you're going to have to decide whether that, you know, IPA at Long Beach Airport is going to be worth it at $16 or not. Yeah, you could have gone to the Ralph's and gotten it for $8, but you know what? It's double the price at the airport, and you're looking at it, you're like, well, you know, if this is what I want, this is what I'm going to have to pay for it. And I think for the Bears, they kind of were in that situation. Had they been with multiple picks, that could have been fine. I think mostly when you look back at stuff like that, and I think it's easy to go through and you know, you do redrafts. I think that we've all done this at some point, redrafts where you're like, well, look at this. And they, you know, if you would have taken Darren Woodson 10th overall, like, okay, yeah, fine. Like that worked out.
Yeah, right.
I think it's more damning. Like if you're the Broncos and you took Jake Butt with the pick before George Kittle. Like, I think we get away. Like, people forget that we took Adam Shaheen in the 2nd round because Jake Butt was right there. But I think that the Iowa player always ends up better. So there it is. I think we'll be okay.
That's why, like I said before, you got to do the grades right at the point, because nobody was saying George Kittle was going to be a superstar when they picked him, and nobody. And nobody. You know, you say he's a good player. But,
I liked him. I actually did. But I'm going to lean towards Iowa players, obviously.
Right. But I mean, look, overall, he was never mocked in a 1st round or 2nd round even, right? I mean, like, nobody said that. And so that's why you have to take that, you know, shot now. And that's why I say right now, Tory Taylor may not be as good as Hicks and Stover and some of these other guys, because you have to put that on paper somewhere. And teams have to do that too, but it's very difficult for teams to, when they're going back to evaluate. You don't see that a whole lot where guys are fired because they said this guy was better than this guy, because everybody makes mistakes, right? But still, you have to make a note of that at the time so that when you're looking 2 years from now, it's not just hindsight.
I remember they said the Adam Shaheen thing was so long ago. This is back when Daniel Jeremiah wasn't on. He wasn't on the main telecast of the draft. Mike Mayock was still doing it. And so we did a show off of, was it Stage 2 at the old Culver facility at the NFL Network. And we were doing an online show. And I think it was Marcus. No, it was Money. It was Matt Money Smith. Lance was there. Bucky was there, and Daniel Jeremiah. And the Shaheen pick comes in. I'm like, this sounds stupid. And DJ's trying to sell like, hey, like, and you know how it is. Like, this guy, I'm like, this all sounds like garbage. I don't want any, like this just, it's just going to end up being a dumb pick. And then I think I was, it's not on camera or anything like that, but I was like, why wouldn't you pick somebody like George Kittle who went to Iowa? And they're like, Bucky's like, yeah, who was the last good Iowa tight end or something like that? Like Bucky will do, be so dismissive of me, but in a good way though. Bucky's just
that happens, and that happens to everybody. And then we forget, like I had the same thing when I was in Culver in 2012. They, the Commanders took RG3 and then they took Kirk Cousins in the 4th round. And we're sitting in the newsroom the next day, and everybody's talking about it, how dumb that was for them to take a second quarterback. And I just said, look, Kirk Cousins, we don't know about RG3. He's had injuries, all that stuff. If you got a second round grade on Kirk Cousins, we also didn't know who made the RG3 pick, and now we're pretty sure who made it. And it wasn't the Shanahans. Okay. So Cousins available there in the 4th. I say you take him. You need multiple quarterbacks, and you take them and you see what you get. But then we forget, you and I and everybody else tries to forget all the times we were wrong, right? Because as human beings, we've been indoctrinated that like that is part of the human makeup. If you thought about all the times that you didn't get food when you lived in a cave, you'd be so overwhelmed by anxiety that you wouldn't be able to go out and get right. So you have to look past those and think about the things that you got right. And that's how you keep your confidence, and that's how you keep doing this business. So again, that's why it's good to write this stuff down and kind of evaluate it when you evaluate it later.
I think from a Bears perspective, I think the last time I was so because I'm still not willing to concede that Justin Fields was the wrong pick. So I'll never, until we see him, if he has a career like Mitch Trubisky, then I will eventually come around and be like, okay, actually I won't, because I'll still contend that the Bears screwed him. I will say that the Bears screwed him up. That was a organizational fail.
Yeah.
But I do remember one player who I loved so much. It was Kylie, not Pitts. Was it Kylie? God, the guy who played at Redlands High School, went to UCLA. And
Fitz, the edge rusher.
Kylie Fitz, yeah. So I was
UCLA, yep.
Yeah. I was so convinced. I'm like, this is going to end up being one of the better picks. Like, this is going to be one that we look back on and go like, how did he fall in the draft? Yeah. And even like there were always some sort of like, I felt like in camps and stuff, I'm like, oh, it's going to happen. It never did, unfortunately. I think he's coaching locally. He's either coaching high school or he might be a part of Deshaun Foster's group up there at UCLA now. But it's so easy to be wrong and it's so easily to be convinced. And right now, as I sit here and listening to you tell that story about Kirk Cousins, like, yeah, sometimes taking a risk in the 4th round is not the worst idea. So I can hold my hat on that. And I still believe that Tory Taylor is going to be a good pick. And so I'm looking forward to him never playing. But if he does, if he's kind of a cross between McAfee and Darren Bennett, like, the Australian guy, but also a great personality, I'm good. I think that's a good.
Positional value is a little different between quarterback and punter, but whatever works.
I hope
the young man does well.
Even
when they play against the Packers. Against the Packers, I'll say that.
Don't lie to me. Do we have some time to take? Do you have a couple of minutes to take some questions? I'm sure we have some out there. Sammy, if we have any questions, I know that I've been ignoring everybody. Bruja7, do you see Booker used as strictly a 3rd down berserker? I like his Terminator, like relentlessness. Yeah. Do you think when he starts off that he's just going to be a 3rd down guy?
He's a DPR designated pass rusher to start. That's what he'll be to start. But he's got the strength and he's got the ability to play against the run. So in time, look, DeMarcus Walker is not going to be around forever. He's going to eventually turn into more, I think. So maybe year 2, he starts getting some more reps. And look, injuries happen too. And I think he's got the potential to be more than just a DPR, sooner than later.
Yeah, I hope to see it too. And again, like it's for a 5th round pick.
Yeah,
it's not a bad spot to come in and be a situational pass rusher. It's something the Bears definitely need. How about another question there? If we have one. David Ree, would it have been better for Justin Fields if the Bears had held on to him until after the draft? This way he could be traded to a team where he could start. David, I'll take this first and then I'll defer to Chad.
Yeah.
But we talked about this a moment ago about, I think Caleb is going to be so overwhelmingly popular that it ends up like not being necessary for Justin to be around. And again, like this isn't an unprecedented situation for a team to do that, because we saw it happen with Jimmy Garoppolo when the team took Trey Lance to the point of like Jimmy Garoppolo was on a separate field. And I think that Ryan Poles just wanted to do the right thing. And I think it ends up being the best thing for the Bears, even if it costs them what could have potentially been a 2nd round pick instead of a could be 4th round pick.
Yeah. And the thing with Poles, and this was really impressive, and I don't think a lot of GMs would have said this publicly, or maybe said it publicly, but actually meant it. They wanted to do what was best for Justin Fields because they know that he was in a bad situation that he didn't have. But they also had to do what was good for the team. So that's what they thought they did. And I think what you don't want is you don't want 2 young quarterbacks on the same team at the same time that are really the starter. I don't know that would have been great for the team. I really don't. I understand the theory of what he was saying. I do. If Fields was like an average starter for a few years, then you keep him and then you see if you can get more. But the thing is, teams knew that they weren't going to. Fields was not sticking around, no matter what he did in the preseason. So there was no leverage whatsoever, and teams were not going to offer up like a 2nd round pick for Justin Fields, because a lot of teams. And look, Justin Fields looked better this year, but a lot of the teams still have the same thoughts about Justin Fields that they did at the time of the draft, and they didn't like him. So they're not going to turn around necessarily based on what they saw and offer a 2nd round pick, even if their starter didn't, got injured or whatever. So in theory, in a lot of cases, yes, I think that would have been a good move. In this particular case, I don't know that they would have saw a lot more value, and I don't think it would have added much to the team's cohesiveness over the next few months.
And, you got to look too, a lot of the potential teams that would be looking for a quarterback if it didn't work out of the draft. I think of the Raiders in this instance. They still have Gardner Minshew. Like if the Raiders didn't have Gardner Minshew, then perhaps you could have waited to see what happened to the Raiders, because they got into a position where like, we're not getting any quarterback, and we're going to go with Brock Bowers, which, by the way, in my mock draft with a twist, I actually recommended the Raiders do this thing, even though they got Michael Mayer the season before. Teams run 12 personnel, and I think Brock Bowers is going to end up being like, I think that was a great, I love that pick.
I don't understand how teams let that dude fall to 13. I really don't. That was the Raiders had to run that pick up if people actually ran picks up anymore, which they don't, but virtually run the pick to the podium. I think the dude's going to be a stud, and teams are going to kick themselves for not taking him when their offensive lineman that they took is a marginal starter.
Oh, so you're talking about the Jets. Okay. But I think the Jets are like, I don't know, they signed 2 35-year-olds to go play tackle to protect their 40-year-old quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't know. They could have probably just blown the whole thing up. I know they want to make a go. I'm so refreshed that we're not in that spot anymore. Like the Bears are not in that spot to where they have failed with a couple of quarterbacks like Mitch Trubisky, which was awful. But that's right. That was the one thing too that I always loved when people are like, hey, you know what? Like Mitch Trubisky wasn't in a great situation because they had signed Mike Glennon, then drafted him. Justin Fields, not in a great situation because they had signed Andy Dalton and then drafted him and all this stuff. Ryan Pace was on both of that, was controlling both those teams, and now he's on the staff in Atlanta, and they do virtually the same thing. With just more money with Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins, like compared to Andy Dalton and Mike Glennon, like Kirk Cousins is like a superstar compared to those guys.
Those situations are not at all the same. Not at all the same, because Glennon was obviously just a backup, even though they gave him, $10 million. Andy Dalton was obviously just a mentor backup in that situation. And then people are likening this Penix cousin thing to like the Jordan Love situation. They're not anything the same. They're not even close. The same. So like none of those situations are like what went on in Atlanta, which was really weird. So no, nothing like.
No, not even close. Ryan Pace was so scarred by the Packers that he's like, we're going to do the Packer thing here. You're like, it doesn't make, like, why are you drafting a 25-year or 24-year-old, however old he is? It's too old to be doing this. If you have a 21-year-old quarterback, oh my God. God bless him, because it was one of the reasons why the Bears were able to land Rome Odunze. So very happy.
That's right.
We were sitting there, we were doing the show live, obviously. And, when they said, like, yeah, Michael Penix is the next pick, you're like, okay, like it's Rome Odunze. Like, oh my God, this is really going to happen. And so hopefully it does work out. I do want to ask you, Minnesota, I'm so torn on them. I know that I still believe that Sam Darnold can be a good quarterback for them. I think that given an opportunity, he could do this. Do you think that Sam Darnold starts for most of the season for there? And when would JJ McCarthy be ready to take over for the Minnesota Vikings?
I think people are very much underestimating JJ McCarthy right now. And I think
I'm one of them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think he doesn't have to start right away, but if he shows enough in the preseason and him and Kevin O'Connell are on the same page, it wouldn't shock me at all if he's starting week 1. Sam Darnold had a shot to be the guy.
Yeah.
It's the Jets. It wasn't great around him. I get all that. But I think we know what Sam Darnold is. And he could be just fine as a starter. But I think this is not going to be a year where the Vikings are going to compete for the NFC North. It just isn't.
Regardless, don't tell them that. Don't tell them.
I'm just saying, it's going to be the Lions and the Packers and the Bears and the Vikings. That's how it's going to go. So they're going to play McCarthy at some point. If he's ready, he will play, and it'll probably be early, because that dude is smart. He's got everything you have, and you need to see what he can do. And so I think he's going to be pretty good, and I think they're going to end up playing him, if not 3/4 of the year, then probably half the year, if the Vikings are 2-6 or 2-5 or something like that. That's what I see.
What about their draft? I thought they did pretty well, and I think that some of the comments or some of the rumors that are coming out, or some of the news, like, hey, they offered this for Drake May. You're like, dude, I'd rather just have JJ McCarthy anyways. But you also also replaced your pass rusher. I thought the Vikings, like, so not for them, like they really tried to screw this up so bad, but yet ended up having an amazing draft because other teams weren't willing to trade with them.
They picked really good players. I liked the players that they picked.
Yeah.
Next year they have no picks left. They have the 1 and 2 5s. They gave a lot of their picks away for next year.
Yeah, they did do that.
So that's the issue that I have with that draft. And you got to love that they got Dallas Turner. I was floored that McCarthy wasn't picked earlier. So, but the guys that they got, I like the kicker, Richard from Alabama, like Walter Rouse from Oklahoma, and Dallas Turner is a good player. So, like, they got good players, they got good value. Next year is going to be kind of a bump in the road if they don't, and they might be able to move down in the first round, especially if they're not any good. They can move down and pick up some of those. You can pick up additional capital. So that'll be part of their plan, or they'll trade players, or they'll find ways to get those picks. But that's just the one kind of hesitancy I said about that. They gave up a lot of picks for next year for, Turner and some other. And look, TJ Hawkinson was a very good pickup for them too. So they have some things that they could build around that team. I'm just not sure it's going to happen this year with a very competitive division.
Yeah, they're in that weird spot too, where they could run the risk of drafting but having Sam Darnold there helps them out so much. Yeah. But they're drafting a quarterback and they're trying to develop when their team's not quite ready. I think like the Bears and what Houston did last year as well is like, now they have a team that's ready to compete. And I know that, I've made this point before and everybody's like, well, everybody tries to build around a young quarterback, but I'm like, very few teams have actually gotten it correct where it just builds to the timing like the Bears have. Can you think of any other time? Like you think of the situation that Caleb Williams is in right now, where has there been a quarterback picked at the top of the draft who's had a better situation than Caleb Williams?
A better situation. I mean, in terms of the receiving core around him and some solid backs, no. I mean, not very many. Like you mentioned, Herbert. So there's been some, but not a lot. Not a lot. But the line, we'll see. We'll see if it's the best line that could be in front of him. And if they, like I said, they were better. They were definitely better last year. So if they're cohesive, if they work together, if they stay healthy, maybe that group would be the weak link in that offense. It would have him struggle. But look, he's got enough guys around him now. Komet, getting Gerald Everett was nice to have a number 2 guy. So like they have the weapons around him to help, and not a lot of quarterbacks have that. You're right. That does not happen very often. If the line's good, they could be pretty good on offense.
Yeah, I wonder too, and I don't want to get into a situation where we start, running down Justin Fields because he's not here. But there were times where you're like, this dude is holding on to the football too much. Yeah. Like there were times like I will love quarterbacks where you're like, oh my God, like get rid of the ball already. Do you think like there could be a similar situation where like Caleb is committed to getting rid of the football, and then you're like, oh wait, this offensive line is much better? Because when you look at them run blocking, they were a great run blocking team. And I'm like, are they just that inept at pass blocking that they couldn't get it done? But no, they had to go out there. But no, I think that if Caleb is more committed to throwing the football on time, that this offensive line can look so much better.
And if the receivers are able to gain separation or get Williams's trust that they're going to make the catch when contested, that's also going to help him out. And one thing he did at USC at time was not trust that was going to be the case, even though he had some decent receivers. So he's got to get over that and get over that hump. And once he does, it's going to be like Jaden Daniels wasn't that great until this year going into LSU.
Oh yeah, that's weird. He wasn't that great at ASU.
Yeah, and now he was like a 3rd round pick coming into the year. But halfway through the season, he became really decisive. He got rid of the ball. If he wasn't there, he ran. And if you get that decisiveness in Caleb Williams during his rookie year, and he trusts all these guys around him, then everybody's going to look better.
Yeah, if you don't trust Keenan Allen right off the bat, I don't know. Like we might have bigger issues than anything like that. But it is funny too, because I remember, Dan Orlovsky on one of those shows. It might have been McAfee, where he's like, I don't remember Jaden Daniels having a Notre Dame game. And you're like, bro, did you not see him at ASU? Like this? And he's so old. Like he was throwing touchdown passes to Brandon Ayuk at, I think Nick and N'Keal Harry was there too, right?
Right.
Like he's been around forever.
He has. And he's had some really good games, and then he had some games that weren't very good. So he was very inconsistent, and he was not a 1st round pick coming into this year. He's not. But that happens pretty much every year, where one guy or 2 guys become that 1st round pick because they show that they've matured and all that stuff. That's going to happen next year, by the way. All these people are saying, oh, their quarterbacks are going to be low again. And then we're going to see Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck from Georgia, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss could have a huge year this year. So he's going to be in that conversation. Noah Fafita from Arizona, who a lot of people don't know. He might be 5'10" and change, but he's pretty talented. So you're going to have some names pop up here during the course of the year. And then, we'll be talking a lot about quarterbacks again.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure of it. And it's one of those things that happens each and every year. It's somebody will reach for a quarterback too. They'll be the toolsy white guy too. They'll be, like Drake. There's a Drake May every year, like Blake Bortles, like every year. Like, I don't know. And I don't want to speculate on, but I just want to be happy about Caleb Williams. Now, I know you were backstage when the show opened. So my final question to you is, I've already said that there should be an expectation that this team is in the mix, like is going to win double digits. Are Bears fans just setting themselves up once again for failure? Because I don't care. I'm doing it. but I just want to know your opinion.
Oh, I think you should be 100% optimistic until there's reason not to be. That's the whole reason the draft is so great, is because it gives us hope for our teams. I've been saying this for 25 years. I've been covering this for 25 years. That's why it's great, because you get a chance to be really optimistic about your team until something happens and then it doesn't turn out. But that's fine, because that's the way life is. So, yes, be optimistic. It's going to be a very competitive division. The winner of the division may have 12 wins, and the last place team may have 7. And the Packers and the Lions and the Bears may all be in that 11, 10, 12 area, depending on how everything shakes off in the non-division games and all that. But yeah, I say be optimistic. I say, and the nice thing is that even if they win 8 or 9 games, if Caleb Williams shows he's the guy, you got optimistic going forward, and you can continue to build with him and Odunze and some of these other guys, and just build a little bit more around him. So I say be optimistic for the next 3-4 years. You're going to see something really good, and that you really haven't seen in Chicago since, Sid Luckman. I don't know.
You don't have to be that mean. I've pointed it out. Like, McMahon wasn't a bad pick. Even Jim Harbaugh wasn't a bad pick. Cade McNown was lousy. Rex Grossman, not great. Mitch was an obvious miss.
Bob Avellini was awesome. Brian Bashagel was a great receiver. Look, the names are just – no, you know what? Look, the Bears got something and should be happy about it.
I think so. And it's great for the NFL when the Bears are good. And I don't think – I can't even remember a time. I don't even know if there was – I mean, I guess you could go back to Hallis, Lombardi. But, like, the Bears and Packers have never really intersected much as far as, like, being really good teams. Obviously, the 2007, 2006, 2007, 2009 NFC Championship game.
The NFC Championship game, but it doesn't happen much. Yeah,
there was one blip, and it was –
it doesn't matter if the teams are any good or not when they play. So that's the great thing.
Right, that part of it,
my first memory of football is watching Chester Markle run a ball in for a touchdown, against the Bears. Like, I'm 8 years old. That's one of the first things I remember. So, like, it's been great, and hopefully the Bears and Packers will have some good games, and they'll both be in the playoff hunt this year.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember talking to Nick Vial one time, and he was like, my first memory was the Mike Tomczak or the Mikowski game. Mikowski or Tomczak was our quarterback. Wait, was he?
Yeah.
But that was it, but as great as the Bears were in the 80s, the Packers were garbage. And then the Packers became good in the 90s and the Bears regressed. And so it'll be fun if both teams are like, good. Yeah. And I think there's a great opportunity for that. But listen, speaking of opportunities, I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to play golf this time around, schedules being what they are, but hopefully, listen, I'll come out your way and play one of these days. Absolutely. I can fly.
Anytime, man.
I can fly with some clubs.
I got you free passes to the club I belong to. We'll get out there and do the thing.
That's all I need to know. I will. I'll make a detour on my trip because I'll be going back east a couple of times this year. But in any event, I want to thank you once again for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you. California is always better when you are here in the state, so we will miss you when you're gone. Thank you so much for being here, and let's talk again soon, please.
Sounds great, man. I appreciate you having me on and for the kind words.
Thanks, Chad. And so we don't have our outro in this case. So I'm just going to end it right now by saying bear down, be optimistic, and we'll see you soon. Sammy, just end the show.